In the year 1999, a phenomenal event occurred in the skies which altered the course of human history.
It's always either be eaten out in the battlefield, no matter who or what you're up against.
I have only spared you from total dissolution.
The aliens have taken hostages and are controlling their bodies. Listen, ooh la la, we're taking off by Astrobeat spaceship right now.
Roger.
Oh yeah, this could be fun.
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bones.
I can foretell many things in the future. So, let's see your future.
February 3rd is the day the magic happens. The Von Braun, the first starship in history capable of traveling at faster than light speed, will undertake her maiden voyage. This incredible journey is the result of teamwork between the UNN Protectorate and the incredible scientific minds at the newly relicensed Tri-Optimum Corporation. Imagine being able to travel to distant star systems in a period of weeks. It's all part of Tri-Op's commitment to the future. The Von Braun is packed with over 1.8 billion flight, scientific, and security systems, nearly all developed by Tri-Optimum and its wholly owned subsidiaries. Providing security for the Von Braun as she plows through the heavens will be the UNN Rickenbacker. At her helm will be no less than Captain William Bedford Diego himself, hero of the Battle of Boston Harbor during the Eastern States Police action. This incredible union of government and corporation is made possible by an intricate series of docking mechanisms that will allow the Rickenbacker to piggyback its way into jump space. Sleek, fast, revolutionary. Who knows what wonders await our crews in the bosom of the cosmos? All we do know is that it's a great day for mankind.
An unknown environment where nothing is for certain, where guidance is impossible to come across, where the unexpected will sneak up and surprise you regardless of how prepared you are. Even in settings where what seems impossible is possible, the unknown will strike fear into your heart. But even in the face of horror, some games at least kept the player safe behind the player character they saw on screen. But on occasion, the game will remove that comfort and make you feel more immersed in the uncomfortable atmosphere with the first-person perspective. The 1994 System Shock was among the first to achieve this level of immersion in a horror game. However, its sequel would be the one to simultaneously evolve the horror genre, innovate the way first-person experiences in video games are viewed, and would inspire a way to bring long out-of-print games back to the modern audiences. Prior to System Shock 2, the popular go-to for first-person experiences were shooters. From id's multiple shooters to Rare's GoldenEye, and to Epic's Unreal and subsequent Unreal tournaments. But first-person games were more than just shooters. They were driving games dating as far back as the 70s with Atari's Night Driver. They were role-playing games like the original Phantasy Star, Elder Scrolls, and Ultima Underworld. And it was the Ultima Underworld games that became the roots for what System Shock 2 would become. It began with director Doug Church, producer Warren Spector, and the first game they worked on together, Ultima Underworld: The Stygian Abyss, developed under the name Blue Sky Productions, which would later become Looking Glass Studios. Ultima Underworld became the first role-playing game to be considered immersive and non-linear, on top of being the first in the entire Ultima franchise to be presented from a first-person perspective in a 2.5D environment. The result was a role-playing game that was considered the most innovative of its time when it was released in 1992. After Ultima Underworld was finished, work immediately began on the sequel, Ultima Underworld 2: Labyrinth of Worlds. The sequel took 9 months to develop, but during development, the team at Blue Sky Productions, which had become Looking Glass Studios at this point, had started to feel burnout, mainly due to how rushed the sequel was compared to the previous game. To help alleviate the feeling of burnout, a new kind of 3D immersive game was considered. First, an immersive game set during modern times. Then, according to Warren Spector, a spin-off of the successful franchise, Wing Commander, was considered. Eventually, a brand new game was decided, mainly due to not being limited by the conventions of an already existing franchise. System Shock. A game that further pushed immersion in gaming by allowing the player to look in every possible direction instead of just left and right. The game did not take place in a dungeon. Instead, it took place in a space station in the year 2072, taken over by the rogue artificial intelligence, Shodan. While Ultima Underworld had dialogue branches that helped personalize your experiences while advancing the story, System Shock did away with dialogue trees. Instead, the game expected the player to understand what was happening through audio logs and emails, many of which were from victims of Shodan and their influence upon the Citadel Station.
They can wield this type of thing from the flesh, creating entirely new mechanical limbs for self-defense and other measures. I still don't understand why it's projectile weaponry.
This pivotal part of the game expanding on the lore was inspired by the 1915 Spoon River anthology by novelist Edgar Lee Masters. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, was also an inspiration behind this method of storytelling, with designer Austin Grossman citing the scene where Gandalf reads the records of the dwarves who perished in Moria. While it was nowhere as successful as Doom, it was still regarded as a critical hit, even garnering multiple awards from various publications at the time. Retrospective reviews of the first System Shock hailed many of its gameplay features as having a significant influence on future adventure and action games. After the release of System Shock, Looking Glass Studios struggled to repeat their success, and in 1997, they were acquired by Massachusetts software company Intermetrics. This resulted in much of the staff leaving the company. 3 former Looking Glass Studio employees would soon start a new studio, Irrational Games. The founders of this studio were Robert Furmeyer, Jonathan Che, and Ken Levine. The first game to be developed by Irrational Games would be System Shock 2.
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors. How can you challenge a perfect, immortal machine?
Furmeyer, Che, and Levine had one thing in common. They were big fans of the original System Shock. They approached who was left at Looking Glass Studio to help co-develop what would become System Shock 2. The original version of this game was going to be called Junction Point. The early pitch for the game was that it would be paced like a role-playing game, and that the player, not the gun collection, will grow. The early pitch also criticized shooters of its time as games of attrition. Junction Point also likened itself to be closer to games like Alone in the Dark and Resident Evil, rather than Doom, with a story that blended the original System Shock with the film Apocalypse Now. It was a pitch that sought to distance itself from the way the press mistook System Shock as another Doom clone, resulting in the game not selling as well as it could have. The pitch for Junction Point was passed around until it caught the attention of Electronic Arts, who at this point owned the trademark of the System Shock IP, thanks to Warren Spector, who had left Looking Glass Studio to form the Austin, Texas branch of Ion Storm, with backing from Electronic Arts. EA was willing to publish the game, but suggested that instead of an original title, Junction Point could become a sequel to System Shock instead. Levine, who would become the lead designer of this game, was okay with this, as System Shock was the main reason he got into the game industry in the first place. All he had to do was rewrite portions of the story, but the game design itself did not have to change. Another advantage the System Shock 2 team had with being attached to the original was that they had access to Shodan.
I am
Shodan. My analysis of historical data suggests a 97.34% probability that you are aware of my birth on your planet and my rebirth into beauty on Citadel Station.
They understood how integral Shodan was to the first game, but did not want to make the player have the same protagonist-antagonist relationship. Instead, you would become a reluctant ally to Shodan, united by one common goal.
I am pleased. Transmitting cybernetic modules. Do not squander them.
The game was designed using the Dark Engine, which had been used to develop Looking Glass Studios' 1998 Thief the Dark project. However, the version of the engine that the System Shock 2 team got had faults. It was incomplete, it lacked all the necessary application programming interfaces, and it forced the team to find fixes for bugs that the Thief team had to deal with when they developed their game. The engine was the main hurdle that the team had faced, but despite its faults, the Dark Engine was also useful and just as essential as it was a hindrance. For one, it was easy for everyone on the team to contribute to the game in some way. It was also a way to see how devoted to games each member of Irrational Games would be. The engine, and the rights to the original System Shock, allowed them to easily reuse older assets and improve on them. The engine also made it easy for both the newer game designers of Irrational Games and the vets over at Looking Glass Studio to seamlessly work together. When it was time to reveal the game to the public, Irrational Games was hit with an unexpected hurdle. Less than a month before a demo of the game was to be presented at E3 in 1999, the Columbine High School shooting had occurred in Littleton, Colorado, shocking and devastating the nation. Video games, especially first-person shooters, were one of the main targets of blame by the US media and from concerned parents as a result of the tragedy, forcing E3 to implement a policy that guns could not be shown in any of the games presented at the event. So instead of relying on how the player can stop enemies, the promotion focused more on how open-ended the game was. Irrational Games was able to release a demo of the game to the public on their website in August of 1999, 2 weeks before the game's official release. When System Shock 2 was released, it was met with near universal acclaim, everything from innovative to genre-defining to well ahead of its time were the responses the game got upon release. More attention was given to the horror aspect of the game when compared to the previous. However, despite how well the game performed critically, the game sold only less than 60,000 copies in the span of 8 months. It was released in North America in August, then in the UK the following month. At the time of the UK release, System Shock 2 was given an update that included a multiplayer mode and adjustments to the difficulty. After the game stopped receiving official support, the PC modding community would step in to give unofficial but useful updates to the game. One of the biggest patches for System Shock 2 came from a user only known as Le Corbeau, which was released in 2010 to help stabilize the game on then modern computers. This patch would be known as the New Dark Patch. Sadly, less than a year after the release of System Shock 2, Looking Glass Studios would dissolve. Because of Warren Spector's deal with Electronic Arts, they were able to own the rights to the System Shock name, but Looking Glass Studios was still able to keep the development rights to the franchise. But when Looking Glass Studios dissolved, the development rights went to Meadowbrook Insurance Group, thus putting the entire System Shock franchise in licensing limbo for the entirety of the 2000s going into the early 2010s. System Shock 2 would not get another official release until 2013, 14 years later. The husband and wife team of Stephen and Alex Kick had worked for Sony before quitting their jobs and going on a self-discovery road trip to Mexico. During the trip, Stephen Kick had brought some games with him to play on his laptop, one of them being System Shock 2. He discovered that on his laptop, he couldn't even install the game. That revelation motivated Steven to contact the subsidiary of Meadowbrook Insurance Group, who officially acquired the intellectual property rights of the game from Electronic Arts, Star Insurance Company. Steven was able to convince the IP holders that they would be making profit by bringing such an important and highly requested game to modern platforms and digital distribution stores like GOG and Steam. With that, a deal had been reached. However, the deal would require a licensing fee, so Steven and Alex returned home, and with assistance from friends and family, they were able to raise the funds to license System Shock 2 for distribution under their newly founded company, Night Dive Studios. Night Dive Studios was officially founded in 2012, and System Shock 2 would finally be released in May 2013, much to the delight of the over 30,000 fans who had wishlisted the game on GOG. Ever since then, Night Dive Studio had gained a reputation for doing license rescues of games and franchises like Turok, Quake, and in 2015, they were able to bring back the original System Shock. In 2023, after several years of failed attempts, Night Dive Studios would release their own faithful remake of the first System Shock for the PC, PlayStations 4 and 5, and the modern Xbox consoles. After the release of System Shock 2, lead designer Ken Levine would continue to work on different games like Freedom Force, Tribe's Vengeance, and the 2007 spiritual successor to the System Shock games, BioShock. BioShock would become one of the most highly acclaimed games of that year for its writing and the atmosphere of the entire game. BioShock would be the beginning of a new franchise for Levine. While he and Irrational Games were not involved in the development of BioShock 2, which had been developed by 2K Marin instead, Levine and Irrational Games would write and develop the 2013 BioShock Infinite and its episodic downloadable content, Burial at Sea. BioShock Infinite, like the first BioShock and System Shock 2, would become one of the most highly praised games of that year. However, the retrospective reception towards BioShock Infinite has been far more critical, citing its handling of racism and more simplified gameplay mechanics. Irrational Games would shut down in 2014, only for it to come back in 2017, rebranded as Ghost Story Games. In 2022, Ghost Story Games revealed its first game, Judas. The game is currently in development as of this episode of Silver Age. System Shock 2 would become a game that would influence the way games are experienced, and would do such a good job of doing so, it would inspire someone to find a brand new way of license rescuing even more games. System Shock took the horror and adventure genre to directions that didn't seem possible in the early 90s. System Shock 2 would perfect the innovations introduced in the first System Shock. The innovations have since become standard tropes for future horror and future adventure games. The horror game genre found a way to be so immersive by making everything experienced in the first person, creating a newfound discomfort that has since been pushed in future first-person horror titles. Adventure games would start to scatter lore all over for the player to find in obvious locations or in very obscure locations. And for the longest time, System Shock 2 could not even be legally acquired until a new studio was founded just to help bring the game back to modern audiences, as well as even more titles that had been considered out of print, and continues to do so this very day. For all that was achieved for the game industry, as well as for games themselves, System Shock 2's influence continues to be seen all the way up to the 25th anniversary of the game.
Vigilante 8 for Nintendo 64. Blow up.
System Shock 2, composed by Josh Randall and Ramin Djawadi. This soundtrack is fast-paced, intense, and exciting. If you didn't know where the music came from, it would be very easy to assume that this came from an action game. But nope. This is a soundtrack to a horror game, and it works. You are in a space colony in the cyberpunk future, the Von Braun. You are fighting machines and mutants alike, many of which took over the ship against the will of their creator, Shodan. The music is just a mask to disguise the true horrors of the world around you. On top of the upbeat electronic music, you'll hear ghastly moans, menacing dialogue, and the sounds of your enemies as they attempt to kill everything and anything around them. Ramin Djawadi studied music in the Berklee College of Music, earning summa cum laude honors in 1998, eventually finding work for Hans Zimmer's score company, Remote Control Productions. System Shock 2 was one of his first scores, but he has since gone on to define his career in memorable films like the first Iron Man, the Clash of the Titans remake, Pacific Rim, and his most recent film score as of this production, A Wrinkle in Time. He has also worked on television scores like Prison Break, Game of Thrones, and Westworld. In an interview with Business Insider, Djawadi reveals that he's been diagnosed as having synesthesia, defined by WebMD as experiencing one of your senses through another. He goes on to elaborate his condition as where he can associate music with colors and vice versa. While Josh Randall's roots can't be traced to Hollywood, his resume is still an impressive one. Under the alias Robot Kid, he has made a name for himself as one of the creative directors for game developer Harmonix. Harmonix has been responsible for some of the Western market's most memorable music games like Frequency, Karaoke Revolution, Guitar Hero, and Rock Band. System Shock 2 defined horror by providing a contrast of visuals and defining the experience with some of horror gaming's most memorable encounters. All these visuals and terrors would serve as the foundation for another innovation to the horror game genre that would come 8 years later, BioShock.
And then, what happened to the girl Melanie?
She was gone the next morning. She left with practically everything in the room.
You don't have much luck with women, do you?
Well, you know what they say. The cleanest breakup is when a woman runs out on you.
What else is her statement? Oh, but you're lucky. I mean, to have so many people to kid around with. For me, I'm all alone. I've been all alone all my life.
What about your childhood?
Yes, I did have a childhood. I was born in a small town in Wales, right off the banks of the Taliesin River. It was a small gypsy town.
Gypsy?
That's right, gypsy. And we didn't call ourselves gypsy. We called ourselves Rom. See, a true gypsy is born under the blue sky and is destined to die under the same blue sky. It's gypsy law.
So then I guess you plan on dying underneath the blue skies.
Every gypsy is given a name at birth. My given name was Slato.
Slato? Mm-hmm. It's got a strange resonance to that name. What does it mean?
I can't tell you.
That too must be part of the law.
The law it is.
You know, ever since I met you, enigmatic, mysterious glint in your eyes. Man, it must be the gypsy in you. A glance from thy soul-searching eye can raise with hope, depress with fear.
Byron again?
Yeah.
You must really like him, don't you?
Yes. So I feel as though we're birds of a feather.
Then he must be self-obsessed as well.
I'd rather be classified as a romantic. My father was a strict man and couldn't forgive his son for failing academically. He blamed my failure on the time I wasted inventing adventures, dreaming of a utopian landscape. I was brought up to believe that dreams, the power of the imagination, as well as all the things I loved as a child, were useless, a complete waste of time. It was as if he was telling me I was useless. And then again, maybe just that. I think I was probably born too late. By the time I was 15, everything there was to be done had already been done. The Western territories were colonized. The jungles had been explored. There was no wilderness for me to wander into. No jungles for me to cut my way through. I guess that's how I ended up roaming the country. And granted, I picked a few fights along the way, played with fire, gambled on my life a few times. But none of that comes close to the truth I'm searching for. I yearn for something far greater. I can't quite explain myself, but it's as though I'm on a quest for some intangible treasure of sorts. Koudelka, I envy you. You have psychic powers that few are blessed with. Being born a gypsy, you can choose to live how you wish.
And who gave you the right to act as if you figured me out? Do you have any idea how I was raised? You make me laugh. Adventures. Please, you haven't the slightest clue. Do you have any idea how much pain my psychic powers have brought me? My father died when I was only a child. I predicted the exact time, place, and ending of my father's life. Imagine that, predicting your own father's death. You know, I was cursed as a child, being given powers not meant for a child. And my mother, oh, she was so frightened and so full of hatred for me. She tried to kill me with her very hands. The gypsy elders got together and decided to excommunicate me. I was only 9 then. Do you have any idea how a 9-year-old child survives without the help of a living soul? Treasures, you must be joking. Have you ever cried and begged for your next meal? Did you ever sell your body, seeking shelter from the frigid night air? I used to be just like Charlotte. When she cried and said, "No one has ever loved me." Oh, her words cut straight through me. It was me she was talking about. Just like her, I wish that everybody would die and harbored a hatred for all mankind. But you see, Charlotte has made her peace and gone to heaven. Me, I'm still alive and still all alone. No one has ever lent a helping hand. No one.
Koudelka, you?
I am not as free as you make me out to be. I am a poor, dirty, ignorant woman who threw her gypsy pride to the dogs in order to live. But you see, even someone like me can do good. Because with my powers, I can help ease the pain of others. That's when I feel good about living. I don't need to be loved. I just want my life to have some meaning. And just want someone to tell me they need me. You. No way will you ever understand.
Side available. Side available. 989 Studio.
せねばまい。構え。どうあがいても神には決して逆らえぬ。